Friends, Dave Paulides, Can-Am Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And we're with the executive producer, Huck. She just had a bath. She's smelling so nice. And she's so white when she gets all cleaned up. She's a good girl. And we just got out and taking a long hike in about 25-degree weather. It was a little cool out there, but she liked it. And we're back.
Sorry, I don't understand.
We're back. Yep. That was my phone acting up. So, we're going to talk about two missing person cases today. Yes, two. And they are both hunters. Yeah, we talked about hunters earlier, a couple sessions ago, and about how many go missing. How many have heart attacks? But the heart attacks part, a lot of you made comments that, oh, maybe it was the jab. Except the problem is that those hunters started disappearing in the early 1900s, way before jab was even around. And there were masses of them disappearing way back then. Today, that might be part of the issue, but I have no idea. But I'm telling you that in the early 1900s, there were a lot of hunters that just went missing. So let's talk about the first case. This is in Upper New York, an area that I have studied well, and there's a lot of missing people up in that area. His name was Howard Kirby, 38 years old. Went missing November 16th, 1941. Think about 1941. Thinking about the early 1940s, how many unusual things were happening in our world? The area he went missing was west of Cranberry Lake in Upper New York. He was a deer hunter. He was married and had 5 kids. His hometown was Chaumont, New York. So where did he go missing? All right, well, that's a good question. So this is Saranac Lake. He disappeared in a city called Wanakena, and that is just barely west of Cranberry Lake. This is Old Forge, Fort William Henry Museum, Gloversville's down here, Saratoga Springs, Ballston Spa. So this is the Upper New York area. I'm telling you that there is not a lot going on up here. If you went hunting up in this area, you're going to see a lot of bogs, very thick forest, tough. He was right on the fringe of the Five Ponds Wilderness. So you kind of get a feeling of where this is. Now, I've talked to you about this area before. I've written about it more in my books, and I've talked about it a few times here, but in my books, especially the Eastern U.S. book, this area comes up a lot. Well, Howard went up alone, was going to hunt alone, and always had hunted alone, and had gone to this specific area many times in the past. Nobody was even at least a bit concerned. Well, Mrs. Kirby realized her husband hadn't come back in the time frame she was given, so she gives the descriptions of the car to the state forestry officer in that area, a district ranger named Moses LaFontaine. And on November 19th, 1941, was the day that Howard went hunting. I'm sorry, November 19th was the day that Howard was supposed to be home. Well, wife called, expresses her concerns to the district ranger, and on November 20th, he gets a natural wildlife officer to take a flight over the area in search of the vehicle. Now, while this is unfolding, 20 miles south of Cranberry Lake, there's another man that goes missing, a man named Joe Germain, 25 years old. He'd been missing 4 days at this point, around the same time frame as Howard Kirby. So the Department of Natural Resources had 2 cases of missing hunters that they were working, and that can deplete resources very fast. But they're working it. After they found Joe's or Howard's vehicle, and they found it in Wanakina, there was an initial search around the car by the first 2 rangers that got there. They looked around, called his name, honked their horns, sounded their siren. Nothing happened. So they get the approval to make a full call out. And on November 21st, LaFontaine gets as many government employees as they can to the area. Now, the profile report on Howard would have been very healthy, active, could hike, experienced in the woods, knew this area, would not be somebody that would get lost. And he had camped there alone before. Well, 15 miles east of where they found Howard's car, just by a pure stroke of luck, is a New York State Ranger School. So the district national ranger made a request that the students at the ranger school respond and help with the search, and they got it. In total, they had 200 people that first 2 days looking for Howard. Now, the students stayed on site for 7 days. And Howard's father, his name was Joseph, brother named Arthur, and Mrs. Kirby and 2 daughters all participated in the search daily. It kept escalating. It kept getting bigger, but they weren't finding anything. They had canines, they had people, they had planes, nothing. And the frustration level kept mounting because none of it made sense. Remember I told you before how a search and rescue person ends the search? They really don't end it. You, the victim's family, ends it. Because they don't want anything coming back on them. Well, towards the end of the search, a couple of canines picked up a scent. They didn't know if it was Howard or not, but the dogs took off for a while. Eventually it petered out. They didn't have anything, no more to go on. So on November 26th, Moses meets with the family. And he does the classic song and dance. This is the places that we've searched. We don't know where else to search. 95% of the time, everyone would be found in this area, and they haven't been found. We don't know what else to do. What else do you think we should do? And a family is going to go, I don't know, and it looks like you've done everything you can. And that's exactly what Howard's family said. This is why search and rescue needs an intermediary between the family and the searchers, so that the search can't give them a bunch of bull and get the search over. When somebody at 38 years old, they can be found, even after 7 days. Family stated that they agreed that more searches would be useless. Here's my take on that. Howard was 38 years old, in good shape. No medical issues. If he broke a leg, let's say, and he was near water, so he could drink, he could live for days, past 7 days. Yes, he could. As long as you have water, you could survive much longer. If you don't have water, you're not going to live as long as you would if you did. So in this case, there's a subcategory. He's a missing hunter. He's hunting off trail. He's quite near water everywhere on this hunt. And I did a little lookup for you of a UFO sighting in this exact same area. So the location is Star Lake, which is just a couple miles east of where Howard disappeared. National UFO Reporting Center dated the incident March 17th, 2009. Unexplained flashing lights over Star Lake. My brother-in-law and I were coming home from the convenience store, and I had seen a strange light in the sky. I don't know what it was, so I didn't respond immediately to it, but kept an eye on it. The light was big enough to notice, but the trees were making the light indistinguishable. As we continued to drive home, I then saw the lights much more clearly. There were 4 huge circular lights, each light being bigger than that of the street light, flashing, then would disappear. Then 1 huge circular light would appear and disappear. Then 4 more lights would appear, then disappear. And the cycle of circular flashing lights continued in that pattern, 4 then 1. They continued to flash and move at a steady pace towards the south. My brother-in-law was amazed at what he saw and yelled, "What is that?" Neither of us knew for sure what we were seeing. I had moved slowly down the road observing it, and then stopped completely in the middle of the road to observe this odd and unique sight. After about 1 minute, it just disappeared out of sight. This was my first sighting ever of something in the sky unexplainable. If you would have asked me about UFOs before last night, I would have been a complete skeptic. Neither of us can explain what it was that we saw last evening. We just know that it definitely an unidentified flying object coming from the north and traveling south. Right in the area where Howard Kirby disappeared. It could have been over his area, and we just didn't know. And if you're new to this, and even if you're not, a healthy reminder. In my movie documentary, Missing 411, The UFO Connection, UFOs took a hunter. So I'm not saying, and I never have said, that all missing people are related to UFOs. I just lay out facts. But I'm not an idiot. And I know you're not either. Now, this area of northern Michigan has a long, long, long history of UFO-related events. Just the facts. Next case. Oh, by the way, Howard was never found. They went back the following spring, searched with cadaver dogs, didn't find anything. So what happened to him? Well, that's $1 million question, because there aren't any huge predators up there like there are in Montana. And he had a rifle. So if he would have been injured and laying down, hunters who need help, you fire off 3 rounds in rapid succession and wait. Wait a half an hour, 45 minutes, 3 more rounds in rapid succession. That's universal distress call for help. All right. Next case is a man named George Shanic. Chebanik is Russian. How do I know that? Because I'm half Russian. 70 years old. His home is Willis, Michigan. He went missing November 17th, 1986. He was also deer hunting in northern Michigan. The last case was in northern New York. Northern New York and northern Michigan have the exact same type of sightings, exact type of missing people, exact same UFOs. So when I intersperse New York and Michigan, that's why. Now, Willis is a suburb of southwest Detroit. It's about a 3-hour drive, 200 miles. Well, George was hunting in northern Michigan, and he left his home for a long-planned deer hunting trip to an area he had been to many, many times. He was described in very good health and mentally completely stable, no Alzheimer's, no early dementia. He planned to hunt daily and sleep in his car at night for a couple days. Now, he went to an area near Houghton Lake, near the Dead Stream Swamp, between Houghton Lake and the Dead Stream Swamp. This is a northern Michigan area. Northern Michigan has a ton of UFO-related activity. Same as New York. So he's been to this area many times. He knew it like the back of his thumb. He was driving a 1986 Ford Escort. And his wife kind of knew that he was going to be in that greater Houghton Lake area. Remember the other case? Cranberry Lake. This area, Houghton Lake. Lakes everywhere up in these areas. November 20th, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, November 19th, Michigan Department of Natural Resources gets a call from George's wife reporting that her husband should have been home. He left on November 14th. He's supposed to be home yesterday, the 18th. Hadn't come back. Again, she knew he was in that Houghton Lake area. Didn't know exactly where. Typical call. Sheriff's offices get these all the time. November 20th. Department of Natural Resources puts a plane up in the sky, and about midday they locate George's car. They dispatch a Michigan State Trooper to the vehicle, and at the vehicle, this is important, they find a thermos of coffee almost full, a bag lunch, hadn't been eaten, and a blanket, and an empty rifle case. Now, you guys are critical thinkers. I'm going to make you do this one. What does that tell you about what happened here and when it happened? Let's go through it. So if the thermos of coffee was almost full, that means that he hadn't been there too many mornings, right? And the lunch hadn't been eaten, which meant that he had probably disappeared that first day, and that first morning he went out. His rifle case was empty. Obviously, he went out hunting. Now, the location where the car was at is right near this place called the Dead Stream Swamp. Not sure if that's a place I would hunt, but George had had success there in the past, so we'll go with it. His wife explained to the troopers that her husband would not have been lost there. He'd been there many times. He knew it like the back of his hand. He wasn't senile. You kind of get the picture. Well, the troopers call for a complete SAR call-out for November 21st. And troopers get volunteers, other hunters, and they get aircraft to converge on the search and rescue zone. Six different dog teams scoured the landscape, and they didn't find anything related to George on a scent. 50 searchers broke it up into a grid. Nothing found. Now this area, if you've never been up there, sometimes you can walk along and it looks like it's land, but then you sink right down into it quickly. It can be tricky. But this isn't George's first rodeo. He knew this area. So, local reports for local consumption. The state trooper that was in charge of the search was a man named Sergeant Floyd Milliken. Milliken organized it and terminated it on November 25th because of heavy snow that hit the area. He gave a press conference and he said, quote, referring to George, he could have wounded a deer and taken off after it and gotten deep into the swamp, or he could have had a heart attack or broke a leg. But he's got to be out there somewhere. That's what he said. That's a lot of rationalization there. So let's take it one step at a time. Let's say if he had a heart attack. Well, then wouldn't canines have come onto him, tracked him right to the place where he had the heart attack and find him? Don't you have some good feelings that your dog works? Dogs work? And if you broke a leg, well, you still have your hands and you still have a great signaling device, the rifle. Remember what I told you about shooting 3 rounds? And then chasing a deer into the swamp. Again, this isn't George's first rodeo. He's been around the block. He knows you just don't do that. Well, the following year, April through August 87, there were several cadaver dog searches of the area that produced nothing. And this story continued to get big press up to 2 years after the event. People were very confused and concerned that nothing related to George was ever found. Now, this isn't like his car was stolen and it was dumped there. No, that was the place he was going. He was a very unassuming man. He was going to sleep in his car, not bother anybody, and hunt, get up early in the morning and hunt, and after a couple of days was going to come home. But something happened that first day, right? What could that be? Well, again, I go back to the National UFO Reporting Center. This happened July 6th, 2018. Over Merrill Lake and Houghton Lake, fishing at 1 a.m. when we looked up at the stars and witnessed an orange bright light in the sky at tree level over the lake. The dot appeared to move in spontaneous directions such as circular motions up and down, never followed a pattern, stayed there and kept moving. We checked the rest of the sky and found similar moving lights, never moving like a plane. Orange orbs, very popular. National UFO Reporting Center, August 11th, 2012. Houghton Lake, Michigan, shape triangle. I want everyone to pay attention right here. On Saturday night, August 11th, 2012, my boyfriend and I planned to go to Walmart. We're traveling southeast on Houghton Lake Drive. It runs right next to the lake, approximately 10:05 p.m. It was dark. We were on the road for about 3 minutes, and suddenly I saw, coming from the west, over the trees from the lake and the sky, 3 brilliantly bright orange lights shaped into a triangle, and one single, same bright color light, following it. It was so close to us, and so bright I could barely make out deep blackened outline of the triangle-shaped lights. And I could make out a triangle, and it looked huge. I said to my boyfriend, "What is that?" The lights were moving very slow, slower than any helicopter or plane we've both ever seen. And we live near a small airport, hear planes all the time. We stopped in the middle of the road for just a few moments to shut the headlights off. Then I said, "Let's follow it." Or let's just go, because it was not safe. Turn our lights off, and it was a busy road at times. We followed and watched it until we got on M18, runs north and south. It took us at least a minute to get there. Then we pulled over in a family restaurant parking lot. It is closed that time of night and quiet. On the west side of M18, to keep watching, this time we shut off our lights in the vehicle and got out. We heard absolutely no sound from these lights that were still moving very slow. Then as we watched for about 2 minutes, it got into the clouds, totally out of view. Then, to our surprise, 2 more lights came from over the lake. We were on the east side of the lake, and they were following each other. They also looked very huge, and the same kind of lights, but they were both single to both of us. It looked like the first one slowed down so the other could catch up right before they disappeared into the clouds, heading in the same direction as the first. Moving southeast, he says. After they were gone, I looked at the clock on the car, said 10:20. We watched this for approximately 10 minutes. By the way, meteors don't move like these. We're an older couple in our 50s and never seen anything like it. Triangle UFO over hunters in Idaho. Missing 411, the UFO Connection. Watch it. You can watch it for free on Tubi. You can watch Missing 411, The Hunted, on Tubi for free. Triangle, Houghton Lake, Michigan, October 1st, 2001. Hunting season. Spotted a triangular object while exiting the highway. Almost crashed into a cop. Was not even pulled over. While exiting I-75 south to M55 at Houghton Lake in Michigan, a little after darkfall, I spotted a triangle off to my left side. The object was huge, silent, and low, about 200 to 300 feet up and at least 70 feet across. Big. About the size that was described. There was a white light at each corner of the object. Oh, son of a gun. A white light at each corner. I could see the shape of the object against the night sky, which was most stunning. It was a triangle. It was moving northeast. I was so intently watching the object that I did not notice that I was driving off the right side of the road. As I violently swerved back onto the exit ramp, I nearly hit a Michigan State trooper that was parked on the side of the road. I fully expected to be pulled over and hoped that the trooper had seen the object also. I pulled alongside the trooper, expecting a strange look, when I noticed his dome light was on, with a briefcase open on his lap, frantically searching through the papers in the case. I waited for a couple of moments at the stop sign, waiting to be pulled over. After I was not arrested, I excitedly got back on the highway in the opposite direction in pursuit of the triangular craft. The trooper was probably looking for his camera in his briefcase. Yeah. Okay, after I was not arrested, I excitedly got back on the highway in the opposite direction in pursuit of the triangular craft. I followed for about a half mile north as the craft moved northeast, and I lost sight as I went due north. The direction of the craft was heading towards a military base in Grayling, Michigan. I'm close to a local private pilot. I'm quite sure the craft was headed towards restricted airspace. Another one, January 15th, 2000, Houghton Lake. Lights on object. Aura or haze around object emitted other objects, emitted beams. Rendezvous of two white lights followed by enormous pulsing light rings. I noticed a bright white smallish blob of light traveling in the sky at high altitude, traversing the sky from east to west. It caught my eye because objects at that altitude do not move that quickly. It was not moving at an astounding rate of speed, but it was moving too fast for the average jet operating at that altitude. As I watched the sky, I noted that it seemed to be heading for an identical small blob of light that was stationary, situated at the same altitude northwest. I watched this drama unfold as the objects seemed to be heading for rendezvous. They finally met and seemed to form a larger blob of light, though there was some separation between them. Then the pulsing rings of light began, light pulses that were slow, forming vast concentric and expanding rings around the center of the two objects. There would be a huge flash followed by an expanding light ring that filled perhaps 1/16 of the sky. As one light ring dampened out, the process would repeat. At this point, I dashed into the house to get my wife to come see. She also saw the light ring phenomena. Finally, the light ring stopped and the two bright blobs of light simply disappeared. Again, this event was not reported in the local papers in spite of the fact that there was a huge phenomenon. I thought it could have been some kind of U.S. Air Force operation, perhaps an exercise in signaling, but nothing was ever reported. Wow. Wow. Yes. Michigan and New York have a lot of UFO sightings. Just the way it is. And remember, New York is part of New York is north of Pennsylvania. Tons of disappearances in Pennsylvania. And remember, UFOs and disappearances of people don't care about state lines, country lines. I've never thought that mattered, and it probably never really did. So when you look at maps that we put out, I wouldn't even worry about the state lines. I would be more concerned about the clusters of disappearances that we've marked at these different locations. So friends, I appreciate you being here. Remember, it's the holiday season, and we only are going to be open for a short period of time because we're closing down our store, I think about the 10th of December. So do it now. Go on to our store. Our store is NA, like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. And if you purchase 2 Missing 411 books, any 2 Missing 411 books you want, you get our hat for free. Yes, the Great Liberty Cap. Please help us out. Get your family something that they'll enjoy. The books are rated high. And the kindness revolution, be kind to the service workers out there. You truckers, I know you're listening. God bless you. Drive safe. And everyone, love your family. Paulides out.